Welcome to Unshielded, the podcast where we explore the cutting edge of blockchain, data protection, and innovation in decentralized technology. Today, we're joined by Sebastien Guillemot, co-founder of Paima Studios and dcSpark, who's here to talk about how Paima Studios is revolutionizing blockchain gaming and how Midnight's technology is helping them to push the boundaries even further with zero knowledge. With the groundbreaking Paima Engine, Sebastien and his team are pioneering trustless Web3 gaming, a paradigm shift from the centralized Web 2.5 gaming model we've become used to a fully decentralized future. With that as the intro, Sebastien, welcome to Unshielded. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. As you might know, Paima has been around for over 2 years at this point. We've built a lot of really cool games that people have really loved to play. And we've built that across different stacks, of course, including Cardano and more recently Midnight, which we've been working with for the past few months. So it's been a great experience. I'm really happy to come on and share our experience with Midnight, the stuff we're working on, and where we see all this going in the future.
Brilliant. Really grateful you've taken the time. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe let's start with the concept of trustless Web3 gaming. Obviously, we've seen Web3 gaming take a bit of a front row seat in terms of some of the things most people are excited about, and we're expecting big things from Web3, but maybe we didn't quite reach the levels we were expecting. How do you see trustless Web3 gaming, and what's important in terms of what you're building towards?
Yeah, so a lot of the games that have been built historically that kind of connect into blockchain have very loose connections, right? So for example, they have a game where maybe your character in the game is an NFT, and that's the extent of the Web3 connection. There's no token per se. The NFT doesn't change. It's just static. And that's not necessarily bad. There's a lot of games where that makes sense, where you just care about the tradability of some asset. But it also tends to mean that the game cannot leverage the full benefits of blockchain. You cannot easily trade in-game assets that you might earn. You cannot prove your game progress. You cannot prove your game achievements. So it limits the amount of tradability. It limits the amount of connectivity that people can really achieve. And oftentimes this is patched over through centralized concepts, like a centralized bridge or an oracle system. And although there are cases where that's the right solution, it also often introduces security risk, because now you're trusting a centralized operator to ensure the game state is set properly. And there has been many cases in the past where either that person is malicious or gets hacked in some method, and that leads to bad results. And so we really believe that by pushing the verification of games and the blockchain connectivity of games, we can not only build experiences that are more deeply intertwined with the existing your favorite Web3 projects, but also do this in a way that is ideally much more secure than what exists before, and even through the power of ZK with technologies like Midnight, also make this even faster and better performance than what you could get in the Web 2 counterpart.
That's a brilliant introduction. And again, what we don't want to do is create walled gardens of selected Web3 experiences. We really want to be able to leverage the full power of an open ecosystem of innovation where gaming assets can transcend borders and games and actually encourage the creativity around the experience or the community. There's a lot more we can do. And as I said, I don't think we've reached that yet, but it's exciting to see your take. One of the innovations I know you've been working on is through the Paima Engine is stateful NFTs. Talk us through that a little bit, because NFTs have a very, very broad spectrum. What is it that you guys have been specifically working on?
I'm going to go into this, but to explain that, we have to first take a step back, because this will be kind of a different way of viewing blockchain data that requires kind of a different way of thinking. To take a step back, what is the value of a blockchain? What does it actually achieve? Your initial thought, a lot of people's initial thought is, well, it creates a chain of transactions that are valid under a specific set of rules. Like we can see all these transactions on the chain, and we can say, okay, Alice sent money to Bob, and Bob sent money to Charles, and we can find this chain of valid transactions. But actually, transaction validity is not necessarily a requirement. Like if you think about it, on Ethereum, you can have failed transactions. The transactions that fail because they ran out of gas or whatever, the failed transaction still appears on chain. So the fact when our transaction succeeded or failed is not the critical part. The critical part is that the data is there, right? If you want to know whose transaction succeeded, whose transactions failed, the state of the current system, the data is all there for you to get, validated according to the rules of the ledger, and then come with a conclusion. As long as everybody's running the same logic on the machine, everybody reaches the same conclusion, right? So essentially, blockchains, and you hear a lot of people talk about this in the space of DA, if you ever heard of that concept, data availability. A lot of the key benefits of blockchains is by making the data available. And so everybody can access the same data source. As long as you parse the same data in the same way, you get the same result, right? So that's kind of one of the key things that blockchains bring to the table. So if you think about what this concept allows, is it allows blockchains to have new use cases appear over time. For example, when Ethereum was created, NFTs were not a concept that really existed, right? This is something that somebody came up with, and people created this kind of social understanding of what an NFT is and what does that look like and what kind of interface should it have and how are the images stored, right? So it's not just about the data, but also about social consensus. What does it mean? How are things structured? How do we fetch data? And so we've come to this agreement, on the EVM side, that if you have a smart contract that has a specific system where the NFT image is pullable from a data source, then it has this specific meaning, and therefore you can trade it on OpenSea and these other platforms. And you can see the same thing happening with Cardano, where there's a native token standard, and we'll see the same thing happening at Midnight and every other blockchain. So now that we have this kind of basic understanding, we can now get into stateful NFTs, which is that, okay, we've come to this social agreement of what an NFT is. We've decided, okay, it has to have this smart contract, this kind of shape. But what if we wanted to allow people to extend upon what the definition of NFT means? How do you add new data to an existing NFT? How do you evolve the NFT? And this is super useful for games, because if you have a game, you don't just want a static NFT that just exists and that's it. You want your experience points, your level, your data, where that monster is in the world. You want all this information attached to your NFT. But it's hard to bake all that into your existing smart contract because you don't know how the game will evolve over time. So you cannot easily say, okay, this is how it's going to work from the get-go, and you can't easily anything. So you need some kind of open standard for how do you evolve this NFT over time. And so that was one of the main things that drove us to create Paima Engine, which is, okay, well, how can we set it up so you can easily create these kinds of standards and easily create these kinds of definitions and have these kinds of NFTs that can evolve over time from blockchain state. And so we've been able to create games using this concept, and I'm going to show one of them to you right now, if I can share my screen.
Go for it. The main premise of Unshielded is we want to see demos, we want to see stuff working in reality, so the more the better. Go for it.
So this is a game we built that runs on Cardano and EVM, so you can play the game with a Cardano wallet or an EVM wallet of your choice. And it's a game called Tarochi, which is an RPG game. So within this game, you can check out your monsters. So here I have two different monsters, and these are two different NFTs. And I also have items, like gold is a token, and all these other things are items that are tradable on-chain. So I can walk around the game world, and inside this game world, the actions are stored on-chain. So for example, if I find an NPC and want to start a battle, that actually creates a transaction on the blockchain to move your wallet into the battle state. And so you can see now we've started a battle. And when I have my monsters, I can choose my monster and choose my attack, which have different abilities. So let's submit a transaction to move our attack. This will probably defeat the enemy. But the key thing is that you'll note that the monsters have level, right? These monsters can level up over time, and you can capture more monsters as you play the game. So there's a certain level of dynamic nature to these experiences that we're able to build, and then it enables you to also trade these NFTs. So if you want to trade these NFTs on the open market, people can see not only did you own the monster, this monster has this specific experience points, this specific level, has made this progress. And by looking at the blockchain state, you can see the entire history of the monster over time. So this is pretty cool because now you can do battles against other people and have the winner of the battle, win gold on chain. So you can introduce stakes. You can compose these primitives with other systems, NFT marketplaces, DEXs, and all these other systems. And you can have some, interesting game mechanics. So, for example, if you go into the wilderness, you can see there's different monsters you can catch. And these monsters you can catch change over time every day. So people can come in every day and capture different monsters, and that kind of drives the rarity. And so we have certain monsters that are super rare and only appear for, an hour every so often. People have to log in that hour and try and capture that monster. And then by doing that, they can now sell it on the open market. And sometimes these monsters goes for like $30 because it's like, oh man, they were able to catch that rare monster at the right time. So it allows you to build these kind of really cool experiences. And so I just want to give you this kind of demo of some of the experiences we've built at Paima Studios. This is a full game, so it can take you a few weeks to play through the whole experience without including, of course, the tournaments and the guilds and so on. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what stateful NFTs can enable and some of the technology been able to build at Paima Studios. And of course, as I mentioned, this whole game was built before ZK was really at the point where it is today. And so one of the main things we're trying to build these days is to lean into ZK as much as possible to try and not only scale the game world to make, build, being able to build even larger experiences, but also try and improve the performance of the game. Like as you saw in the game, when I was in the battle system, every transaction was on chain, so it took maybe like 3 or 4 seconds for your move to go through, which is still playable. But of course, you would like to have this instantaneous action where you submit and then right away it moves and understands.
Exactly. We've all seen the meme where you're playing an RPG and every 3 seconds it comes up with a signed transaction on your MetaMask wallet. Okay, cool. Signed transaction in your MetaMask wallet. Okay, cool. Signed transaction. We don't want that.
Yeah, and so fortunately, we've been able to abstract away the wallet signing. So we built our own technology to have you only need to connect your wallet once, and then it automatically knows how to sign transactions every time. So we've been able to avoid this kind of MetaMask pop-up, fortunately, but we still need to make it faster. And so ZK can enable this by having that whenever you do an action in the game, it right away creates a proof that you're in this game state and you are able to make that action. If you make the action, it leads to this state. And the benefit of this is not only does it give you these much faster transactions, it also lowers the blockchain load significantly, because you can have an entire battle just become aggregated to a single ZK proof that you won the battle and your monster leveled up in some sort of result. And so, of course, this game that I just showed you, at our peak, we had a few thousand people online at the same time. So it can definitely scale pretty well, but leveraging ZK, could scale to tens of thousands, hundred thousands, millions of concurrent active players. And so, the technology that Midnight's building, especially Kachina, and the mental model of building ZK apps with Kachina, I think is really going to be key to being able to build these kinds of dApps that scale.
Absolutely. And I think also if you think about, games where you're putting value on the line, or you're creating rarity, or you're having items that can change hands, maybe you don't necessarily want to create a metadata trail behind some of those items, right? If somebody wins a battle royale and they win a $100,000 prize, maybe they don't want the world to see which wallet that $100,000 prize goes into, right? So there's also some elements of, we want verifiability, but we also want privacy in some of the experiences we want to create, particularly around esports use cases as one of them. I'm sure we can think of more if we went into it in more detail. We talked a little bit about Paima Engine through that flow. I'd love you just to spend a couple of minutes on unpacking what's underneath the Paima Engine. So what are developers getting? What did you build the Paima Engine to address?
Yeah, so the core concept of Paima Engine is to be able to build a lot of your game logic as a state machine, and then driving that state machine from on-chain activity. So you say, okay, whenever a user makes this midnight transaction, call this function on my state machine. Whenever somebody makes this transaction on Cardano, call this function on my state machine. So it allows you to have your game states update in lockstep with what's happening on chain. So this is very different from the way a lot of other dApps are built, where oftentimes they build their quote unquote off-chain logic as just a separate ad hoc structure. And the problem with this is that it becomes hard to connect that off-chain logic they built back to the actual on-chain world. Whereas in Paima, because these are evolving in lockstep and all the information in your state machine is driven 100% purely from on-chain data, it means these are always in sync. You can always easily go between the two and easily reason about the state of your application, as well as it means that anybody else in the world can contribute, because anybody can rebuild the entire state of Tarochi, for example, the game I showed you earlier, just by having the Tarochi state machine and having access to the data on Cardano and EVM. They can run their own Tarochi node and get back the same state, right? So as you might remember at the start of the show, I talked about how, the beauties of blockchain is by having the data available and having everybody know the same set of rules, you can all achieve the same final state, right? And that's how Bitcoin works, that's how Ethereum works, that's how Cardano works, that's how Midnight works. And by constraining the design of your game in the same way, you can leverage those properties as well and tap into the connectiveness and the composability and the expressibility of blockchains, while still being able to have this kind of more flexible environment. Now, when we built Paima originally, we were really interested in another concept beyond stateful NFTs, which is also hybrid dApps. And what does that mean? If you think about it, building a game is a very complex thing, right? There's so many things going on. You have these tokens you need, and these lobby systems you need, and how do you encode player movement, and how do you encode stakes, and how you do private state. There's so many things you need to take into account. And the reality is that there's no one blockchain that could potentially solve every problem, right? There's always going to be different blockchains with different strong suits. For example, Midnight is really strong on ZK. So what you'd really would love to be able to do is leverage different chains based off their strengths while not exploding in complexity, right? A lot of the ways people have tried to build this in the past usually lead you to have to learn too many things for it to be realistic. Like, you have to go learn the entire Ethereum ecosystem. You have to go learn the entire Cardano ecosystem. You have to go learn the entire Midnight ecosystem. And realistically, you cannot easily find a developer that's just, this master that knows every blockchain perfectly well and is able to wrangle it together. It just falls apart way too quickly, or the development costs balloon way too high. And so the goal of Paima is to try and build this kind of system that abstracts a lot of the complexity away from you. So with Paima, you just build a single state machine, and by targeting the Paima environment and writing your dApp in a specific way, you can automatically tap into the Cardano users, the Midnight users, and EVM users, and you don't have to go learn all these different chains just to be able to compose with those ecosystems.
Very powerful, and very clearly something that we've talked on a number of different shows about, trying to make the developer experience much easier and trying to meet developers where they are. We've seen the era of chain maximalism. We're starting to see the era of interoperability, and tools and SaaS capabilities like what you're describing here will definitely lower the barriers. We haven't got game developers out there who are saying, we can't wait to go and convert to Web3. It's like, no, we're game developers. We build games. We would like tooling to help us build games and use new features. We don't want to have to go and learn 6 ecosystems and 17 different disparate languages.
Yeah, and I have a demo to kind of show you an example of some of the stuff we're working on. So obviously, I just show you Tarochi, which, as I mentioned, works on both EVM and Cardano. So we already have these kinds of experiences that has the wallet abstraction and the chain abstraction, all that for you. But obviously, I want to show you something Midnight specific, because, of course, this is a Midnight show. So let me get back to my screen just to share again. So this is a video of some of the chain abstraction stuff we've been building for Midnight. And obviously, a lot of this stuff is still in development because Midnight stuff is still in development. But our philosophy at Paima Studios is that when there's cool technology that comes out, we want to be early adopters, push as much as we can. And so we've been contributing not just to building dApps on Midnight, but contributing to a lot of different pieces of Midnight infrastructure that I'm sure we'll talk about later in the show. But for now, I want to show you the kind of wall abstraction that we've been able to build. So in the simple dApp we have, what we're going to do is make a transaction on Midnight where the result changes your balance on MetaMask. So let's go through it. So you can see, this is kind of like showing you the end result. So you can see here, I opened my Lace wallet. Let me just take a step back. So this is my Lace wallet connected to the Midnight DevNet, and I have some dust tokens inside here. So I'm going to make some transaction in my Lace wallet. You can see here some transaction that could interact with a game or a DeFi application or something. This is just like a demo. So here's, I'm signing my transaction, and then now I just generated the proof, and I'm submitting my proof to the Midnight blockchain. As soon as the proof is settled on chain, it'll be detected by Paima Engine. So keep in mind, Paima Engine is not like an oracle. It's not a bridge. It's just detecting that this happened. And then the token transfer now appears EVM. See, now I open my MetaMask wallet, and you can see I now have some game tokens on MetaMask. So just to emphasize, this is not like a bridge. Like, we're not bridging tokens from Midnight to EVM, but we're instead is building this kind of chain abstraction. So by building with Paima, you can build an app that has state that lives on both Midnight and EVM. So you have like an app that's sharded between different blockchains. And Paima helps you abstract away all these different shards you have in your blockchain into a single endpoint. And the endpoint can be viewed from MetaMask. So you would go to MetaMask and say, hey, this app wants you to add the, like my game network. You add it, and then you can see your token balance within that game. And now you can see your tokens from MetaMask. You can sign transactions from MetaMask. So from an EVM experience, this is a very EVM native experience, right? I go to the website, I add the network to my MetaMask, I make some transactions, I can see my balance shows up. Everything feels as if it was built on EVM. But actually under the hood, as you saw, the transactions themselves are actually powered by Midnight and ZK technology. And so the power of this is that not only does it enable you to, as a dApp developer, leverage the strength of different ecosystems, it also massively increases your target audience. Because now you're not just building a dApp for Midnight, you're building a dApp for all Midnight users and all Cardano users and all MetaMask users. And those users from different chains don't have to go learn about how Midnight works and all the technical details just to be able to use your experience. They can just go in, start using it. It feels like a native experience. It feels like it was built for them. Even though you, as a dApp developer, you might not even know how EVM works. You just built your Midnight dApp, and Paima Engine took care of the rest.
Really like that. And the power there is also that you're able to compose different features from different chains with a single wallet interface, right? So you've got some public capabilities from public Ethereum, you've got some of the shielding capabilities from Midnight, and you can compose that as a dApp developer however you want it to be for the experience or for the privacy of the users. The user doesn't feel that.
Yeah, correct. And so I'm going to show you another quick demo just to show that, this is a really cool tech demo, but of course, Paima Studios, we're also an app company. I show you Tarochi, and we're building different apps and games. And so we're also building games on Midnight. So we're currently working on a game for Midnight. And of course, this is still in development. So the graphics are, developer graphics. But I just wanted to show you kind of that game and what that looks like. So here it is, PvP Arena. So it's a game that's PvP. So I have my characters on the left, and the enemy has their characters on the right. You can see here I can choose which actions I want to do. So I say, okay, my character up here is going to attack down here. My character in the middle is going to attack down here. And different characters have different classes. They have different strengths, different weaknesses, and so on. And so here I'm submitting my turn. And you can see at the bottom it's processing all the ZK proofs. And then now that all these ZK proofs have been generated and settled, you can now see the replay of the results of your actions and the opponent's actions. So again, at Paima Studios, we're not just building a lot of infrastructure for Midnight, from contributing to the core protocol to building the wallet abstraction to building, different primitives in Compact and VMs. We're also, building actual dApps using this. So there's a lot of stuff we're building in parallel, but our hope and goal is to focus on building and bringing commercial applications to Midnight. Because if you have a bunch of companies building infrastructure, that's great. But there needs to be an app at the end. There needs to be a use case. There needs to be something people are excited about and play and enjoy. And that's really our passion at Paima Studios. And so you can look forward to not only, all of the infrastructure built, but also checking these games as they evolve over time and check out some of the commercial experiences that are coming out of our studio.
Thank you so much for demoing that. And again, the important thing here is that we're showing real live use cases and we can explain simply, why am I using ZK in a PvP arena game? What is it about this that we're enhancing? Is it about the performance of the game itself on chain? Is it about being able to verify computationally the turn taking without disclosing who you're playing against, or being able to shield some of the on-chain transactions from public view? And these are capabilities that people can say, oh, that was really interesting. I love what Seba did there. I remember sort of one of the earlier prototypes, I think, from that game was the zero knowledge rock, paper, scissors. And so I was looking at that thinking, oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. If you made fully shielded rock, paper, scissors, that could then lead on as a primitive to other things. And clearly that's led into the PvP arena. So really interesting. And thank you so much for sharing it.
Yeah. And all the code for the stuff we build is all open source. And so if you're interested in building something on Midnight, we do have some open source stuff we have out there. We're trying to, because we're working a lot on like the cutting edge, the stuff we're building changes, Midnight itself changes. If you have any questions, feel free to just come into the Paima Discord and ask questions, and we're going to do our best to help. We're also going to be building a lot of documentation and libraries and so on for people to reuse and join us on the journey together to build these really cool apps.
Fabulous. Really appreciate the contribution to the community and keeping it open source. As we look ahead, Sebastien, over the next few months and years, obviously, as you mentioned, Paima continues to innovate. Midnight, as it moves through the testnet journey towards mainnet, is deploying new features all the time. What are some of the other roadmap items or maybe longer term initiatives that you're working on that you may want to set up or tease here to the audience just so they know what else is coming beyond what you showed today?
Yeah, so we're working on quite a lot of cutting edge tech. So of course, you might, if you're familiar with Midnight, you might have noticed a lot of the stuff we've shown in these videos seem impossible because they're not features that are part of Midnight yet. And that's the benefit of us, contributing to Midnight itself. We know how to modify the code, how to get stuff working, how to use features that are not part of the Midnight mainnet yet, but we know how to set up our own custom dev nets and build stuff. So a lot of stuff you see us showing off are stuff that we're building ourselves, or we know the tricks to get stuff working. So we're working on a lot of cutting edge stuff, and some of the other things that are coming up on top of, for example, like the batching system, the wallet abstraction, the indexing, the ability to write like more complex stuff, the ability to use recursion. These are all features that are in the Midnight roadmap, but you can actually like leverage these today if you know what you're doing. And so if you're interested in those, definitely check out our code base. But we have some other stuff that's not accessible if you know the right way to do stuff. We have some stuff that's even more cutting edge that we're going to be pushing out, coming out later this year. Some of that involves being able to connect Midnight to partner chains and Cardano better, so you can build apps that you can, for example, create your own partner chain that leverages Midnight for the ZK and connects to the NFTs that are on Cardano. And so we're going to be connecting all these components in Paima Engine v2 coming later this year. And so the game Tarochi you saw earlier was built with Paima Engine v1, which is like an old version of the engine, and we're working on Paima Engine v2. And Paima Engine v2 will massively simplify the developer experience versus v1. So just by running a single command, it'll start everything for you. It'll start your Cardano indexer, your Midnight indexer, your Substrate indexer, set up your developer environment, your web browser, like your database, everything just gets set up with a single command. So it'll really massively cut down the time to build dApps. And so we're really excited about Paima Engine v2 to just massively fast track development of applications on Midnight and more. We've also been recently working on a new VM that we're tentatively calling Starstream. And we're going to have more information about this later on. But it's a UTXO-based VM based on top of folding schemes. And our goal is to basically try and push for this VM to eventually become a VM you can use from Midnight, from Cardano, from Paima, from partner chains. So you would get from the Paima stack not only the ability to orchestrate the chain abstraction and the indexing, all that, but also even have your VM that if you target your smart contract to that VM, you can automatically have that contract run on Cardano and Polkadot and Midnight and take advantage of those chains. So this is very much like really, really cutting edge R&D. So if you're a company interested in trying to leverage Starstream, we do have a working group. So we have a lot of different companies who have joined the working group so far, including IOG, of course. And so if you're interested in some of this technology we have, in the early stages, like with this demos you saw today, you can get in touch with us. But if you're interested in this kind of like even more cutting edge stuff like Starstream, we're happy to get more companies involved in the working group and help build the next generation of, ZK powered by Midnight and all the other friends and family in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. A lot to look forward to, Sebastien, and no surprise that you're always some way ahead on cutting edge stuff while also continuing to ship Paima Engine. So thank you so much for taking us through that. I'm sure guys will reach out, get in touch through the Paima Discord. That wraps up our discussion with Sebastien. We've covered a huge amount: the future of blockchain gaming, the innovation that comes from the Paima Engine, trustless Web3 gaming, and of course, the work that's going on between Paima and the Midnight team. Lots to look forward to in 2025. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for the latest updates and more exciting conversations in the world of blockchain, data protection, and gaming. Unshielded is brought to you by Midnight. To find out more about how the Midnight Network is helping everyone to build a more equitable and accessible internet, visit our website at midnight.network. And remember to search Unshielded on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.